Got quiet awful quick. But good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. I think you'll find it a very enlightening and exciting discussion this evening. I'm Kevin McKenzie, Chair of the Board of Catholic Charities and Interim President. And before we invite our guests on stage this evening, I'd like to open by showing a very short but wonderful video of Sister Norma that was produced actually by the University of Notre Dame back in 2018 when they awarded Sister, and I'm not going to pronounce this right, but the 2018 La Terre Medal, which was the oldest and most prestigious honor given to an American Catholic. So we're going to show the video first, and then we'll bring them up on stage. Thank you.
Sometimes I say, I can't believe how many people are coming, you know? It's like almost as if those countries are going to get emptied. They've gone through so much. They've traveled through so many countries from Central America, either Guatemala, Honduras, or El Salvador. They've been in the road, in their journey for many weeks, and most of the time walking and just hiding from people from hurting them. All of them are dirty and muddy, and they're scared, they're frightened. They need help. They have been processed by Border Patrol, and they have been allowed to travel. The community has responded by making sure that they get the care and the attention they need. Their families walk in and they're amazed, and sometimes with tears in their face because of the joy they see of being welcome. You see this transformation begin to start to change them and to see the dignity that is so important in every person's life.
Solo por el hecho de portar un arma. Entonces, cuando yo recibí esas amenazas de que me decían que me iban a sacar los órganos a mis niños, por eso yo tomé la decisión también de ese granito ahí de amor para nosotros los inmigrantes, y Dios los bendiga y los guarde siempre a ustedes también.
I've come to experience something beautiful, and that is God Himself in the immigrant, in the refugee. In the moments that I had to be able to help and to be present with them, it's a very special transformation that happens to us as well.
I think one of the most important aspects of Sister Norma Pimentel is the way she lives her faith. You talk about a pillar in the community when it comes to selfless service. Without Sister Norma and without the community engagement, our mission of border security would be a very difficult mission to achieve.
At the end of the day, you live here exhausted, but you live here with a sense of accomplishment that you've done something good. Helping another human being is never wrong. That's never a wrong thing to do.
I just was reminded, actually, as I'm looking at this, if everybody could just make sure their cell phones are on silent, that would be fantastic. I feel like I'm starting Mass every Sunday. Silent. But it's now my pleasure to welcome to the stage WBUR's Radio Boston host and tonight's moderator, Tiziana Deering. Thanks, Tiziana. Next is CEO of IDG Media and co-panelist, Mr. Mohamad Ali. And a very special guest of honor, Sister Norma Pimentel.
Could the three of us just test our microphones real quick?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
There we go. How are you? Good. One of the great things about being a part of a daily radio program is all your listeners know the format. So they know exactly what to expect, which means that they can kick back and enjoy the content. So I'm a big believer in that. So let me tell you what to expect. In a moment, I'm going to invite both of our panelists, each one at a time, to tell you just a bit about themselves and make about 5 minutes of opening comments. When we're done with that, we're going to have a discussion. I'm going to ask some questions, and I also have the slider app, because I'm that fancy, up here on the iPad, and I'll go through some of your questions and ask them as well. Before we do any of that, though, the teacher in me is going to break the rules for a second, because if you gave your time up to be here tonight, it's because you came to learn. And while I have detailed questions from you here, I'd like 30 seconds of shout-outs. What did you come to learn tonight? Just shout it out. I'll hear you.
What it's like at the border.
Okay.
People's lives.
Okay.
What do we do?
Okay.
What we can do to make things better.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Say that last one again.
How do they keep on hoping?
Okay. So is that helpful to the two of you? Excellent. So there's our learning agenda for the night, if nothing else. All right. So Sister Norma, please do not mistake my being casual for me not having sufficient respect. It is just that a more casual style will lead to our learning better and have less ado about it. So, Sister, I'm going to turn to you. I'm going to invite you to either sit here or stand there. And tell us who you are from your perspective and what your opening comments are. And at about 4 minutes, I'll give you a little wave to let you know to wrap it up.
That means I have to stop?
It means you get to ignore me for the first 10 seconds and then stop.
Muy bien. Okay, so I come from the border, as you all may know. I grew up there in South Texas, and I think that is why I am who I am. You know, I actually came to be so involved with the church and with immigrants because they were there and I was there. And so God had somehow took a hold of me and said, I want you to come in this direction in my life. And my life changed, and my life was completely dedicated to helping the immigrants in many ways. But it's not because they're immigrants, but mostly because they're people. And because I think I came to understand the importance of the respect for life, you know, and what that means in our life, in our community, and being that voice for the people who are suffering. And so today, as you may heard, the past couple of years, we had quite a humanitarian crisis at the border. And suddenly, all of a sudden, this year, things changed. You know, it's almost as if the whole humanitarian crisis was fixed overnight. You know, they stopped coming. At least that's the appearance of our administration and what we hear in the news, that the whole immigration crisis is resolved. The truth is, if you really look underneath the surface, you will see and realize that the humanitarian crisis is even worse today. What we're seeing, the hundreds and hundreds of people that were arriving, that were actually caught and released, you know, before. And as we hear in the news constantly said, criminals are coming into our country, they're catching them, and then they're releasing criminals. The truth is that our law enforcement in the border are doing their job. They are defending and protecting our borders and making sure it's safe, and making sure they know who enters our country. And for sure, they're not releasing criminals. They are releasing the families, the children, and the mothers that we help and that we respond to, and that we have a very good working relationship with Border Patrol because they recognize one thing, like all of you must recognize as well, that we are called to defend human life and respect human life, and they agree and they believe that this is what we're called to do. But today the new policies have gone even worse, to the point that instead of allowing them to stay in the United States and process and determine whether they have an asylum claim or not, they're forced to go and wait in Mexico. And there's where they are, the thousands of them. So we're there with them, and we're reaching out to them and providing them with the care, the compassion, the presence that a person needs to give them back hope. That the fact that they have to wait there for so many months, some of them almost a year already, and they feel hopeless, and they see themselves coming back from their asylum hearings where they're, in their own words, are described as they were so terrible to me. My story, the fact that they killed my husband, that they were after me, and I left with my daughter because if we'd stayed, they would have killed us as well. The judge told me, "You look like you're healthy. You can go back home. You can take care of yourself and work over there in your country and take care of your daughter." So your asylum is denied, just like that. So she comes back, and as I see her coming, sobbing and crying, and I say, "¿Qué pasa?" And she says that they denied her asylum, and she doesn't know what to do now. So she cried in my shoulder, and we cried together, And then she says, "I don't know what I'm going to do because I can't go back. My daughter is not safe." So she chose to tell her daughter, "You're going to have to go yourself, just you. At least you will be safe." And she says, "Mommy, I don't want to go. I don't want to leave you." And she was crying, and she says, "You have to go because this is the only way you can be safe." So she crossed the border, the bridge, and she came into the United States as a unaccompanied child. This is what's happening today. We are separating families still. They're being forced to separate because we're not giving them an option. We're telling them it's not okay for you to come to the United States. So any mother would do this to save their child. Anything to make sure that your child is safe. And this is what's happening today at the border. How did I do with time?
You did brilliantly on several levels. Mohamad, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Tiziana. And first I want to thank WBUR and Catholic Charities for doing this really important event and for inviting me to participate. So thank you both. Where should I start? Maybe I should start by saying I'm an immigrant. So my mom and I came to America when I was 11. We came from a country called Guyana. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Guyana. Oh my goodness, this is one educated crowd you have here. Half the time isn't that somewhere in Africa? Or, It's near Venezuela. It's a tiny country. It's the only English-speaking country. And by 1981, it had degraded to such a level that it was actually illegal to own and possess flour. And I'm not talking like the pretty ones, like the thing you eat. And the reason for that was because the government wanted you to eat only what was grown in the country, and what was grown in the country was rice, not flour. So if you had it, it came from someplace else, and it was an illegal import. So it had gotten pretty bad, and my mom and I came here. We didn't have much, very, very little actually, and we moved to a community where there were a lot of immigrants, not dissimilar to some of the immigrants that Sister Norma talked about, from all over the world. I mean, on my street, we had people from El Salvador and Mexico and Puerto Rico and Jamaica and Haiti and all these Caribbean countries and so forth. And these people, today are contributing members of society. And over the last few years, 3 years ago in particular, when the new administration came to power and this rhetoric of these immigrants being a drag on our society became, sort of popular, it didn't feel right to me. Those people who I grew up with are now nurses at Long Island Medical Center. Some of them are CEOs. Like, I've gotten a chance to be CEO of 2 companies. Some of them are fixing cars. Some of them are, it's this whole swath of very productive stuff for our society. Over the years, I've learned that 40% of the Fortune 500 companies are founded by immigrants or children of immigrants, and 2 in particular you probably know. Anybody here have an iPhone? Raise your hand if you do. Okay. If it wasn't for Syria, you wouldn't have that iPhone. Steve Jobs' father was Syrian. And Sergey Brin, he's a first-generation immigrant. He came to this country when he was 6. Everybody know who Sergey is? Raise your hand if you don't. Okay. Has anybody ever heard of this thing called Google? Okay, so he's one of the 2 founders, right? Without immigrants, our country would not be where it is. And so 3 years ago, after this ban was announced, this travel ban, I set out to figure out for myself whether immigrants were a drain on the society or not. And all the data, and I have 270 pages here, and this document was actually submitted to the Supreme Court in the case against the travel ban, that sort of says that without immigrants we wouldn't be where we are today. And so, hopefully today we'll get a chance to talk about some of the data there. But that's what sort of brought me to this topic.
I don't have to do any of the waving or anything. It's fabulous. We'll see if that stays. So in listening to the 2 of you, I find myself thinking of some sort of opposite ends of the spectrum. And I want to offer those as kind of a way to frame up how we might have some conversation. So at one point I was thinking, well, we've got the micro and the macro. At another point I was thinking we've got the family and the economy. At one point I was thinking we've got the heart and the head, although both of you have both. I do want to acknowledge. And I think there are a number of questions that we can come to, the individual and the system, that was the other one. I think there are a number of questions we can come to where if we recognize that continuum, then we can have a conversation about those questions up and down that continuum. Does that make sense? There are some low-hanging fruit that we're going to talk about, and I'm going to name it and set it aside for a little later because fruit's a great dessert. Human dignity being one of those, immigration reform being one of those. I think we are wise to close with the appeal that we heard from the audience. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? So I think we leave those and work our way towards those towards the end. So I think where I would start is, in your work in immigration, for each of you, what is the single biggest misconception that you encounter that you would like to correct? And Sister Norma, I'll start with you. No, start with you. You're up. Mohamad, go ahead.
Oh, okay. That was...
She meant it.
That was a sharp move there, Sister Norma. Okay. So, for me, I think... I listen to radio, TV, and even NPR.
Thank you.
And I have to say, even NPR, which I completely love and respect, right? And it's my source of truth. You get these questions where the assumptions are just wrong, inherent in the question themselves. And I think one of those core assumptions that more Americans believe this than not is that immigrants are a drain on the society. And that is completely not true. As a matter of fact, without immigrants, our country would fall apart. And let me give you this one piece of this. So I talked about the Fortune 500 companies, right? Imagine if we didn't have 40% of those Fortune 500 companies. What would happen? And that's starting to happen today. I mean, now if you look at the world's most valuable companies, they are starting up in China and India. If you know Flipkart's a very valuable company that was recently sold to Amazon. And on the top 10 most valuable internet companies, 3 of them are Chinese, right? So people don't have to come here to start these companies anymore. They can do it elsewhere and do it successfully. So if we don't have those companies, that's going to be a problem. But let me go to something more basic, healthcare. So over 25% of the doctors in the United States are foreign-born. 8,000 of them, as of 2016, 8,400 of them came from 2 countries, Syria and Iran, right? Imagine if those doctors weren't here. We argue about Obamacare and not Obamacare. The whole healthcare system would collapse without these people. And that's also true in the nursing system. And throughout our economy, we actually need these people. And for the most part, they are highly productive members of society. There's also a misconception that immigrants have higher rate of crime. That's absolutely not true. And at some point, if we can come back to this topic, I want to provide you some hard statistics on that. But when you put all the, just those 3 data points I just gave you there, we're going to have a huge problem if we continue down this policy of having immigrants go elsewhere. So I would say that for me, that's the top misconception. But it's not just a misconception. It's one that is being actively promoted, and the American people now believe in more than 50% of the American people now believe that.
So the journalist in me is always looking for the pushback question. And
Sure.
and before we go to
Go
Sister
ahead.
Norma, which I know you want me to go to Sister Norma, but before we do, the pushback question is that data does not distinguish between the question of legal immigration and illegal immigration, documented immigration and undocumented immigration. And is there a place for that piece of the discussion in the data that you're citing?
I think there's absolutely a place for that discussion, but you can't start from where we are today. At the macro level, immigrants are a net positive, and if you start from there, then we can sort of peel the onion back, right? But if you look at immigration over the last 100 years, not all of it has been legal immigration. A lot of it has been both, and they've all contributed. It's not like the people who came here because they're running from something horrible in El Salvador or Guatemala or Honduras are somehow worse than the people who came here through some other mechanism. And I don't know that I have the data here, but I can't imagine that those people are contributing in a substantially different way than the people who came here legally.
Thank you for that. Sister Norma, I'm going to invite you to answer the first part of the question now, the misconception or the broken piece of the narrative that you'd most like to correct.
I think what is completely so wrong and so misconceived is the fact that we need to be afraid. This fear narrative that is continuously being given to us and making people frightened of what is happening because of immigration, because of the hundreds and hundreds of people that are coming to our country and they're just going to destroy us. We have to be afraid. I remember once I was in the supermarket. I was buying some things, and this lady comes up to me and says, "Oh, sister, I'm so happy I ran into you. I've been wanting to talk to you." And she tells me, and she's talking to me in Spanish. She says, "Tengo miedo." She said, "I'm afraid." Why? And I say, "Why?" And she said, "Because of all those people you're helping, And I say, "Pero por qué? What have they done that you have to be afraid?" And she says, well, I don't know. I'm old and I live by myself. And what if something happens to me, you know? And I see, you know, I've been here 5 years with the house, the center full with hundreds, even thousands of people in this place. Not once have I called the police or have I seen any of the men or people do anything to harm each other or anyone else. On the contrary, they're so giving and helpful. Anybody would be uncomfortable. I go late at night and the place was full. Not anymore, but when it was, we had hundreds of people. And the whole floor would become a sleeping area. We would pick up all the chairs and tables and take out the mops and clean up the floor, and everybody would help and lay down all the mats. And there was packed with everybody sleeping in the floor. And a family would come in maybe at 10 at night, and there was no room. And they would all say, they fit here, sister. And they would move a little bit to make space for that family that was just arriving. This attitude of, what can I do to help this person that is just arriving that needs that space, will make that space for them. This is all the people that I see, and the narrative needs to change because we have no reason to be afraid, you know, but they're making our minds believe that we have so much to be afraid.
So here's the journalist pushback question, because it's my job to do that. At some level, isn't fear of change a species level behavior? Isn't it understandable and natural that when we are confronted in a globalized world with a constantly and rapidly changing environment, that fear is a species level response to that, and therefore one should not that I believe there's a bone in your body that's capable of judging harshly. Let me be clear about that. But that we are called not to judge harshly that fear response.
Not sure I follow what you said. But let me tell you what I think, that in response to what you're saying. I think that we are, our mind, by what we hear in the news or in the media or others tell us, is directed to believe something that may not be true and make us feel a certain way because of the fact that it could be true and we're not sure, and because we don't know. I believe that a lot of us that feel very comfortable to live in our own little bubble of what we want to believe, where we think we're safe, and we're comfortable there. So when something different from that is around us, we prefer not to even go there and keep ourselves safe. And I think that's where the fear part comes in, you know, that I rather believe those that tell me I should be afraid than to really trust that there's nothing to be afraid.
Yeah, so I want to add some math to Sister Norma's heart, if that's okay.
Told you were the head.
There you go. And then I think this question about fear is actually a good one, and we should come back to it. But let's get the facts first, and then we can go from facts to fear. So if it is okay for me to read something?
Jump on in.
I've got 2 data points. So the first one is, I'm going to read it to you, because existing research and empirical evidence show little support of the public belief that immigration increased crime in the United States. Figure 1 shows that the increase of the share of immigrant in the total U.S. population coincides with the decreasing trend in the rate of criminal offenses. And there's a graph that goes, one goes this way and the other goes this way, right? So it's inversely proportional. Figure 2 plots the correlation coefficients between the rate of crime offenses and the immigrant share for each state. Negative, and now does everybody here know what a correlation coefficient is?
What?
Okay, it's going to explain it. A negative correlation coefficient means that an increase in immigrant share is correlated with a decrease in crime. Among 51 states, the correlation coefficient is negative in 42 states, right? So that's data point one. Let's go to the next one.
No, you now need to go back and put that in normal human words.
No, that's your job.
So I think what you're saying is, in fact, the data suggests that crime goes down in areas of increased immigration.
Yes.
Okay.
So
There you
here's the other one, which is fascinating. And by the way, is anybody going to ask me what my source is for that? Thank you. It's the U.S. Department of Justice. Okay. Okay. Second data point. I'm going to read it to you. For the male population ages 18 to 39, the incarceration rate of the U.S.-born population was 4 times the rate of the foreign-born population, the incarceration rate, right? So this idea that you have to fear these people is just wrong, right? I mean, if you're going to fear somebody, fear some of these people who have access to guns and use them in violent ways, right? And a lot of those people are, native-born Americans, right? So I think what Sister Norma is saying is absolutely right, but somehow we have been taught over the years that we should fear these people.
So one of the things in listening to the two of you that I find myself thinking about, and I'll draw on a word that you used, Sister Norma, which was uncomfortable or being comfortable, the bubble and the being comfortable. In this moment of crisis, and you both have painted a different picture of the crisis, and I would say it is likely that no matter what your view or interpretation of the moment we're in, it feels like a crisis. How are we called from each of your perspectives to be uncomfortable?
I think that we are definitely called to be uncomfortable because we're very comfortable in life today. Honestly, we feel very comfortable feeling that I just have to take care of my family and make sure I go to work and everything's perfect, and anything out of that normalcy in my life is uncomfortable for me, and I don't know how to navigate myself in that space, and so therefore I shy away from that and keep people away that are different from me or that think different from me or look different from me. I rather just stay in this group of people that I feel and kind of nurture me and give me what I want and just keep me there. I think that God calls us to break away from that and pull into that, bring in that person we keep out in the peripheries of our life, people that may be around and we just simply don't allow them into our life, So by all means, all those people that are coming from so far away, and we hear in the news and everywhere that they're bad people, Of course, we're not going to want them in our life, So we must be uncomfortable and be comfortable being uncomfortable because that's what we're called to do.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Mohamad?
Can you repeat the question?
How are we called to be uncomfortable in this moment?
Okay, so, I grew up as an immigrant, and one of the things that some immigrant parents will tell you is just stay out of the spotlight, right? Just do your thing, don't make trouble, and don't become too politically active and this sort of thing. And so I think for years and when you're an immigrant, like you know that you say one wrong thing and you get into trouble, so you're a little more careful. And so I went through elementary school and so forth, just doing what I'm supposed to do. And luckily, I got a lot of help from people. I ended up going to Stanford, and then I got these great jobs at IBM and HP, and then I became CEO of a publicly traded company. And for the most part, I just did my job and try to build great technology products, and that was my thing. And then this travel ban happened, and it really was striking to me. And I didn't know what to do. And then one day I went into the office and we got this call in the office. My office was downtown near the park. And Attorney General Maura Healey had decided to sue the administration. And she needed 6 people standing behind her when she announced this at her press conference. So we get this call, and it's pretty clear why I get called, right? I mean, I'm like the only Muslim public company CEO in Boston, right? I say, okay, fine, I'll stand behind her, and then I get this message saying, oh, we would like you to say a few words. So I was like, okay, I'll say a few words. I wrote a few words, and I showed it to our general counsel, make sure, my IBM training, be very careful what you say. I walked over there, and one of the other people was Boston University's Bob Brown, the president. So, your boss's boss's boss, I guess.
Something like that.
Something like that. And Bob looked at my speech and he said, this is not a very good speech. And I said, okay. And he goes, let me help you with it. So, it's like your college professor helping you with your homework. So, he edited it a little bit. And then I went and I stood behind Maura Healey, and I was the first one she called to speak, and I spoke. And I tell you, a lot more passion came out of me than I was comfortable with. And that was sort of the beginning. And I had gone from very, very uncomfortable with this to still uncomfortable, but realizing how important it was. And then one day, Mira Coalition, you guys know Mira Coalition here? The Mira Coalition, called me to go speak at some rally for, against the, for DACA in the, outside of City Hall. And all of a sudden, I was exactly the opposite person that my parents had told me to be. I've gotten more comfortable with it, but not so comfortable that I do what Sister Norma does. And, just to give you a sense, I'm also on the board of Oxfam, which is a large charity, and we have some Oxfam folks here. And just a few days ago, a few of our colleagues, Oxfam colleagues, were killed in the line of duty. And, I visited some of these countries. I visited El Salvador. We do a big project there in gender violence. And I watch what they go through. And even though I've gone from uncomfortable to more comfortable in public speaking about this, I'm still doing it in a very, very, very safe environment. I do not put my life on the line every day. And I just have a tremendous amount of respect for those people and for what Sister Norma does. We have a lot to thank Sister Norma and Catholic Charities and Oxfam and all those organizations that put their lives on the line.
I'm sorry that happened. I'm going to jump over to Slido for a minute, and I've got 2 questions here. I'm going to read them both out loud, and then I'm going to kind of combine them and invite you to answer the combined questions. The first one says, what can we do here in our parishes and communities so far away from the border to help the immigrants in need? And the second is, how would you encourage others to get involved with helping immigrants in their communities? And so I think if we stipulate that there's a near and a far, how do we engage ourselves with immigrants near and far, or those who are experiencing injustice as immigrants near or far, and how do we encourage others to do the same? And I invite both of you, either of you, to jump in on that.
Well, I think that we need to do both. For one, we need to be able to respond to immigrants and refugees here in your own community. It's very important because they are here. They need to be part of your community. They need to be welcome. They need to be able to feel that they belong somewhere. And so that is a very important part that you can play in and help them.
Before you go on, what does that look like?
It looks like you getting together with others that believe that this is important and building a think tank to see what does that look like here in Boston, okay? And come up with possible I've seen different places that I've gone to speak and then gone back to speak at that same location several years back, and they have come together and they are already doing aspects for educating others, for bringing them together as far as representing them in their legal aspect and inviting them. There's different ways that it can happen, and it has to come from you. You have to be able to share possible solutions, possible ways that we can invite them to be part of who you are. Okay.
As a former president of Catholic Charities here in Boston, I'm guessing that's also something Catholic Charities could help you with. Just saying.
Yes,
Yeah.
but even if Catholic Charities or the church doesn't help you, you as individuals can come together and convene each other and encourage each other to start thinking, what are we doing or not doing that we need to do, you know? And then, and you can be amazed at how many bright ideas you're going to come up with, you know? And the other thing is to get involved with making a difference in who gets elected in this country, you know?
That's right.
You have to do that. You know, if the people that are elected by the people are not representing the people, why are they still in office? You know? You must make the changes. It's up to all of us, you know? And it's not just wishing it, but making it happen. You have to move the masses. You have to really make a difference that you really believe that this is a country of the people, you know? And until you really believe that, it's not going to change, you know? And policies that are failed policies are going to continue to happen that are wrong. And what's happening at the border with all these families and with all these children, that we're so horrified to hear children crying desperately in detention, families separated, families dying at the river, a dad with their little girl who was trying to simply offer them a chance in life. Why? Because we made it impossible for them to cross legally into the United States to ask for safety. We are to blame for that child and that dad that drowned in that river in the Rio Grande, and so many others, because we haven't really taken it seriously, the responsibility that we have to elect the leaders that make policies that are just and that are humane. You know, it is our responsibility to do that and to respond to what we see, and not just be guided by what we hear in the news and think that that's the truth. If somebody's not hearing it right, you better make them right and let them know that what we hear in the news and what we hear our administration say is not true. And it's our responsibility to do that.
Great, thank you, Sister Norma. Thank you for bringing up the topic of who gets elected. That's like a super important piece of this. And the thing you were talking about, Tiziana, about fear, I think those go hand in hand. And if you can ask this question about fear later again so we can talk about it, that would be great.
Or you could just talk about it right now. You've
Well,
got the
no,
microphone.
I'd like to answer your question. You know, I don't want to be one of those
You're so well behaved.
people who don't answer the questions.
I'm very used to those people.
Are you? Okay. Well, we're friends here tonight. So, you know, I think in terms of near and far, or what you can do, which was one of the questions here, there's a lot that everybody here can do, and you don't have to figure it out yourself, right? And it's what speak to you, and I'll talk to you about what I do, but depending on what speaks to you, Catholic Charities have a large number of ways that they're engaged in the immigrant community, and I learned that when I went to visit Larry. Larry, where are you? He's out there someplace. And the team at Catholic Charities a few years ago, and I was very impressed with all the work they do, everything from legal services to on-the-ground support, like Sister Norma, organizations like MIRA here in Boston that works on state policies, right? Organizations like Oxfam who work much more internationally, like places like El Salvador, Guatemala, and so forth, but also have policies here and have about 65 people in DC that work on those policies. So depending on what strikes you or where you think you can help, there are lots of ways to help. So in terms of what I do near and far. So I think there are at least two parts to this problem. One is the fact that the people have to come here, and then once they're here, the fact that we don't recognize how valuable they are. And so in terms of the part, the first part of that, many years ago, my daughter was doing a project at Oxfam, and we learned how terrible the condition for women and girls are in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. These are the countries with the highest rates of gender violence in the world. And it turns out that in El Salvador in particular, it's a country of 6.5 million people. It's almost identical to the size of Massachusetts. And just imagine, 7% of this room here, I'm not gonna ask you to raise your hand and figure out what 7% is. I think we've had enough math for tonight, right? 7% of this room are members of a gang, right? And that is the population of El Salvador. And in part because of that, girls are experience a tremendous amount of sexual violence, a tremendous amount of coerced relationships, and a term that I didn't even know before called femicide. And it turns out that for some of these gangs, part of the initiation is to kill a woman. And I was just shocked by this. And so over the years, my wife and I, and my wife is the woman in the front row knitting, have worked with So we've worked with Oxfam to fund a project to a gender violence prevention project in El Salvador, and there are now 6 centers, like physical centers, that support a large number of schools. And after the first time we did this, and the community said it was too controversial because Oxfam does such a great job, and Catholic Charities, these organizations do incredible jobs, right? Eventually convinced the government to adopt this model. This program is now in 10% of the schools, and you can actually see the mathematical improvement in the reduction of gender violence in the schools that they operate. And so why do I bring this up? Because Sister Norma sees this at the border every day. If you're a girl and you're in one of these schools, and there was one school I went to, and one teacher said, a quarter of the girls in the school get sexual abuse by the time they're 10, right? And if you're in that condition and you decide that you're going to leave instead of having to incur this, I can't blame those people, right? And we have this sort of righteous thing here that says, somehow that girl has to apply through this very difficult and complicated system, and it's either that or she stays there and either gets abused or killed. It is a hard choice for us to legitimately say that she should not make in making that trip, right? And so so one thing, the first part of this is, what can we do to create conditions in other countries so that this isn't required? And I don't think our government does enough. There was a time when America played a more global role in creating, in enabling more stable countries. And I can't say that that's a path we're on anymore. We actually have a government that has said that we are going to a more isolationist view of the world. And then the second part of it is here. We're here. I don't go to El Salvador and do this work. The Oxfam team does this. Here, I think what we can do is educate. And I'm very, very thankful to WWBR Catholic Charities to doing these types of things, because this is the forum by which we can educate people on really the economic benefits of immigrants. And I can go on and on about that, but I'm not going to do that. We've already touched on that. So those are just two of, I think, the endpoints of things that we can do. And I think, finally, this topic of who we elect is absolutely, absolutely critical. We are not going to solve the problem is, a difficult problem to solve, but we're not going to make progress on this with, the administration that we have. And so I don't think I get the feeling that this is not an audience that I have to convince of that, but there you go.
So I know you want me to come back to the fear question. I'm going to warn you right now, I'm probably not going to.
Really?
Yeah, well, and the only reason is we have at most 10 minutes left. And that's going to go fast. Listen, as a radio host, let me tell you, you have no idea how fast it goes. You think it's not going to, but it does. And there are a couple of other things that I heard in our shout out that I know are important to frame up.
So can I answer the question that you don't ask when you do that?
You can answer it fast.
But go ahead.
No, do it, but do it fast.
No, it's not fast. So
Dude, you keep saying, I want to answer this other question, and then you're like, no, but I'll do it later. If you're going to do it, do it now.
Okay, fine. I will do it. So I think this fear thing is rooted in something different than immigration. And I've been so one of the things that we do at my company is we study kind of the econometrics of economies, and that we have multiple divisions. One's a media division, the other one is sort of this data sciences division. And one of the things that there's another chart graph. There's a really interesting graph. It starts at 1945, right after World War II, and if you look at the income in different economic strata, they basically grew at about the same rate until about 1980, and then in 1980, the top strata took off at a much, much steeper rate. And so what does this mean? And and it has not slowed down, and it doesn't look like it's going to slow down. And this started, around the Reagan administration and the tax policies. And every administration, including Democrats, have basically just built on top of that. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And so now we have this huge divide. And so we have tens of millions of people, maybe hundreds of millions of people who now don't really have a shot at You're
talking about economic mobility.
Yes, right. And so these people now kind of need somebody to blame. And really the people that they should be blaming are the people at the top, kind of like me, right, who are making the money, right, and getting all these tax benefits and all these other things. But think about that, right? That rhetoric doesn't really fly. Like, neither one of our parties want that rhetoric to fly. And so these people have to blame something. They have to be afraid of, the fear has to go someplace, right? And the fear, is aligned to these other people coming to the country. And so I think this immigration issue is pegged into this larger socioeconomic problem that we have. And that's why this election really, really mattered. There you go.
So, Sister Norma, I almost expected you to drop the mic at that point.
I could. I just don't want to damage it.
Sister Norma, I'm going to turn to you with the last question now. And you talk a lot about human dignity. One of the things that was, for me, interesting in moving back and forth in the anti-poverty work I did before I came to WBUR in and out of Catholic environments was the lexicon, the words that were available in one environment versus another for how you talked about questions like human dignity. And at one level, human dignity is truly a universal concept. And in another, it's a profoundly Catholic concept. And so I think my question to you at this moment is, how do we articulate that universal notion of human dignity and help it become part of the universal conversation of how we are in community with each other?
Okay.
And you got 30 seconds.
Okay, here's the mic.
You can take your time.
The word, the phrase, the actual human dignity has been the glue that has brought all of us in South Texas, in and our community together. I'm speaking of every single faith denomination. It doesn't matter who it was, Catholics, United Methodists, Baptists, Jewish, you name them, all of them. All of us were together as one community, one church, truly. We had the law enforcement, city officials, Border Patrol, ICE, universities, everybody. Joining together in an effort in South Texas, something that you've never seen anywhere else, and everybody asked me, how did you do it, Sister Norma? And it was that response when they asked me, they asked, what are you doing here, sister? And I responded with restoring human dignity. That's what we're doing. Everybody understands that, believes that, and can respond to that. That's what brings us together. Nobody disagrees with that. We are all called to respect life and to defend it. When we don't, it's because we have separated ourselves in some way, protected ourselves with these walls that we put up in our own lives, in our own ways of looking at life, so that we don't see. But all we have to do is see our brothers and sisters before us, and the fact that we know, very clearly we will know in our heart what we must do and what is the right thing to do.
I think that's the right place to stop, don't you? Yeah, I think it is. I think that's it. I would like to invite you all to join me in thanking our panelists for their wisdom and their thoughtfulness.
Thank you, that too, look.
I'm staying down. I think we're done.
We're done.
Back over to you.
Just a special thanks to, is this on? Can you hear me? Oh, you can, okay. Just a special thanks to everybody tonight. I think because of your candidness, we really touched on the core of all these issues, and it was, I felt very, very helpful for the dialogue and to kind of get us through the evening. So thanks very much. Special thanks to Tiziana and to Mohamad, both for being here this evening. All right, but really, really special thanks. Both of you live in the community. Didn't have to get on a plane and come all the way from Texas to be here. So, sister, it was awful kind of you to travel here. And you may not have noticed, but the Boston weather has not been kind to sister. She's got a tissue in her hand, her nose is running, and we have her pumped with medication. So she's been a trooper and hung in there for this evening. So thank you very much.